It is just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Dr. Stefano Troiani, DDS, MSc. He was born in Tuscany, Italy, and graduated in dentistry from the University of Rome. After graduation, he opened his first dental practice in Rome. After 4 years, he sold his practice to finance his orthodontic postgraduate education at the Department of Orthodontics at the Royal Dental College of Aarhus, Denmark, under Professor Birte Melsen. Dr. Troiani finished his postgraduate with only a few euros on his account and got his first job in Denmark, the outsourcing of orthodontic service for 2 towns, which allowed him to finance the opening of 2 orthodontic practices. Dr. Troiani has co-owned practices and worked also in Norway and Germany. 2 years ago, he relocated to Switzerland, where he has started a new practice. He is the key opinion leader for GC Orthodontics Europe and has held courses and lectures in over 30 countries in the last 10 years. Recently, he started the GET project with the aim to provide open-minded, up-to-date, and honest orthodontic education. GET project has local speakers in 12 countries, and 13 new countries are going to be added in 2020. He speaks 5 languages, is not married, has no kids, and likes to spend his nearly non-existing free time in the gym playing piano and traveling. And I'm very sad to be doing this podcast because I think he's going to start off telling me that my lecture for him coming up in Rome has been canceled.
Well, we are taking the decision in these hours, but there are very good chances.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be canceled. It's going to be postponed. We have to move, most likely, the event.
Oh, nice. So I'll get to come back at a later date?
Yes, definitely.
Because I just posted on Dental Town has a coronavirus and patients thread, and I just posted Italian government orders all sporting events to take place without fans until April 3rd due to coronavirus outbreak. So let's start with this. Do you think it's overreaction? Do you think it's hype? Do you think it's just going to be like the flu? Or, you're an amazing man. You're a doctor with a master's in science. What's your take on this coronavirus?
Well, I'm no expert in infective disease. So all I can say is what I hear from experts from WHO or from doctors from the Italian government. Apparently, it's not so dangerous for an individual, but it's very dangerous for a state. Meaning that as an individual, you, me, and younger people especially, they have no big risk of dying. But the problem is that there is a very high percentage of people that need hospitalization, around 5% of symptomatic patients, which if you have 10,000, it's okay, you can deal with that as a state. If you have 10 million people, there are simply no beds enough in intensive care in hospitals. So what the governments are trying to do, they are basically trying to spread the contagions over a longer period of time in order not to have to deal with a huge amount of sick persons at once. And it's news of today, actually, that the Italian government has decided to close all schools and university up to the 15th of March.
And what do you think? Would you do that if you were the president?
Yes, definitely, because once again, the problem is that you cannot afford as a country to have like 1, 2, or 10 million people sick at once, because there are not bad enough to serve that 5% around that would need hospitalization. So what they're trying to do as a state is simply to spread the contagions of a longer period of time. Say that, I think that people as an individuals, sometimes they're overreacting, because as an individual that is not like, cholera, is not like so dangerous.
Well, it might be, they might be overreacting, but I still think that's better than, when the AIDS outbreak came, they didn't even talk about it for, years and years and years. I mean, they just, they thought if they didn't talk about it, it'd go away. So I guess a little overreaction is, I'd rather have an overreaction than the underreaction of the AIDS. So, how is it? Is it affecting dental offices in Switzerland? Is anybody? Have you heard anything from providers?
Well, not yet, but some things are starting to happen that are rather irritating, I would say. For example, we cannot find surgical masks. We cannot order them anymore. which is, I think it's not so nice, because it tells me something, that someone along the chain of distribution must have preferred to sell them directly on internet or to general population rather than to the usual channels of distribution. This is the only thing that can have happened, and I don't think it's so good.
Well, it's I mean, they're going to the highest bidder. So here's all these people that have been buying surgical masks from dental suppliers, have been developed by other people, and if someone's going to offer them twice the money, it's really price gouging. You see it during every calamity where bottled water and food, the prices skyrocket.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just all going to the highest bidder. But it turns out that mask is really only works if you're sick, so you're not spraying
Yes.
everybody. And that's the difference. I think Asia is so cool because, there's basically Eastern and Western thought and religion. And the Western thought, started in Greece, and it was Judeo-Christian, Islam versus the East. And in the the little subtleties, I mean, going back to the first time I went to China, I saw someone wearing a mask, and I was explaining that she's wearing it because she's sick. In America, he said you'd wear it so you wouldn't get sick from her. And I just thought that is just so cool. And so I don't know. It's going to be.
It is. But for us, I think it's we are a bit in a delicate position, because one of the measures that they are suggesting here in Europe is that you should keep at least 1 meter away from other people. And for dentists and orthodontists, is of course not a possibility at all. And the only mask that can protect you is not the one that we are used to use, but is I think it's called an N95. And those ones are totally impossible to find around here. So basically, whether you shut down everything or you have to run the risk.
Well, maybe teledentistry is the solution. I know that's the most controversial thing in orthodontics in America was the Smiles Direct Club,
Yes.
and they're not the orthodontists are not happy about it. What's your thought? What is your thoughts on Smiles Direct Club?
Well, let me start to say that Smile Direct Club does not operate in Switzerland. So, but I know, of course, very well the concept, and we have some similar companies. My thought is that, if they respected their mission, that is to treat really simple cases, I may disagree as an orthodontist, but would still be acceptable. But many of these companies, they don't do that. And that is what concerns me most. I think they are a product of our times, especially in sense of money, meaning that a lot of these companies are cash negative. And the Smile Direct Club recently took a hit in Wall Street because despite having revenues that are not very different from the expectations, their cost of operations is so high because they have to promote their business endlessly more than a traditional office. And so until there are money for free on the market, these kind of companies, they will go on. I'm curious to see what will happen when the money will start to dry.
Well, that's the business cycle, which was a guy not far from you, Joseph Schumter over in Austria. You just would have to drive past Zurich, cross Liechtenstein, and then you're into Austria. His book, The Business Cycles, is because when times are great, everybody loans money, and you expand the capital supply. And then when it gets too high, it usually pops and comes back down. And that business cycle, I've lived through an expansion. My first contraction that I lived through with memory is 1980. That was horrible, the worst one I've seen. Then 87, and then the 2000 internet Y2K, and then Lehman's Brother 2008, and now it's 2020. So I'm expecting that obviously it's an overinflated bubble. The question is, was the coronavirus the last straw of the camel's back that brought him down? But yeah, during great times, they'll loan money to anyone, and then in bad times, they will not loan you money until you can prove that you have no need for it. So, do you think an economic contraction is starting to happen?
Well, I definitely am not qualified to say that. But I think that definitely when that will happen, I'm curious to see what will happen to companies like Smile Direct Club, but also to many of the dental chains, because I would be very curious to see the balance sheets.
And I have seen the balance sheet because I started a magazine in the United States in 1994. And I've had a monthly column since. I'm a dentist with an MBA. So because of that, on LinkedIn, I have like 40,000 followers. So I'm always getting Wall Street people sending me stuff. It's all so much of it. It's NDA. You can't read, you can't share, whatever. But I met with a bunch in Scottsdale about a couple months ago, and you're exactly on, whereas they're used to cheap, free capital. And if there was a contraction, they're basically all sitting there telling me that a third of their DSOs are just doing great, a third are okay, but a third are bleeding. And they all think that if there was a significant economic contraction in the financial markets like 2008, they'd have to liquidate maybe 30% of their offices. So that is, and then you saw the same as far as the stocks goes. You saw that in Y2000, where what people did not realize in hindsight from 94 to 2000, that the biggest driver of all those sales was not just, oh, we want to digitize and we want to go paperless and we want the internet and we want all these things. But they were doing it because their software, the Y2K problem, which was they'd only assessed 2 places for the year. And so the new year wouldn't show up as 2000, it'd show up as 1900. But as soon as Y2K came, everybody was done. And then January comes along, the sales tanked, and everybody thought about it for a little while. But finally, everyone realized, oh my God, it's kind of like after Christmas. You don't wake up in January and say, I'm going to go buy my mom a Christmas present. You're like, no, you just did that. You're on to the next thing. So when the demand slows down, it's going to have an impact. So do you think some people argue that with the Smiles Direct Club going low cost, that you're going to bring a lot more people into the market? And then as time goes by, that's going to develop the upper market. So my first question to you is, currently in where you mostly know what, Switzerland and Italy, or would you say you're familiar with pretty much all of Europe like I would be with the United States?
I am familiar with all Europe and also something more due to my lecturing activity and my connections, like training of speakers for GC Orthodontics. And my idea about that is that at the moment, I may agree with that point of view. It's a widening of the market. On the long run, I'm a bit more skeptical for 2 reasons. Number one, because of automation, increasing automation, meaning that we'll keep increasing the space and the possibility for such companies. And the second thing is that there are starting to be interactions between dental chains and these companies. For example, in Switzerland, one of these players, similar to Smile Direct Club, is owned in a considerable percentage by the biggest dental chain in Switzerland. So you can understand that that implies some kind of synergy, meaning that the patient gets to evaluate his case. His case cannot be treated with only 7 or 10 aligners. The patients get sent where? To the closest office of this chain, of course. So, well, I don't know if for the normal orthodontist that is a good perspective.
Well, to develop a total market, you would need the low cost, medium cost, premium cost. So, you wouldn't have a healthy transportation market if there wasn't used cars and low cost cars. Not everyone wants to start off with a really nice car. My question to you is, based on your view, what % of patients that get orthodontics will get it again in their lifetime? I mean, it's kind of like, I always say, it's like a tattoo. In 57 years, I've never met anyone with 1 tattoo unless they just got it. Seems like they get 1, and then 5 years later, they show you number 2, 3, and then by the time they've got half a dozen. Well, how many times do you think an orthodontic patient gets treatment in their total lifetime?
Oh, that would be very interesting to know. I think it's very variable. Because one thing that I learned working in 5 different countries is that these kind of things are very related to the system of one country, meaning that there are countries which treatment is paid by the state, others which is paid by the insurance companies, and others in which is paid out of the pocket. But to answer to you, how many people would need the treatment again in their lives, it depends on cultural factors as well. In the United States, we are much more obsessed with the smile aesthetic than in Europe, for example. And my professor used to say a very good thing. She used to say that stability is post-mortem. So some kind of relapse will happen in everybody. And how much are you going to be bothered by that? It depends how much value you put in your smile, ultimately.
And I think it's kind of interesting because I think when you're in dental school, you think orthodontics is straightening all the teeth together. But when you watch orthodontic cases for several decades, you realize the game is really in retention, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's also in achieving stability in the first instance with the result. I mean, if you, for example, overexpand in order to solve crowding in a case in which you should have done something else, it will be much more difficult to retain. If you try to bring teeth to the boundaries, the biological boundaries, it will be much more difficult to retain. So the game is retention, but the game is also to achieve stability, a stable result at the end of treatment.
So you said earlier that the United States is more. How did you word it? United States is more. How does a United States patient, you think, want their cosmetic dentistry, orthodontics done different than Europe? How would you?
Oh, very different. I mean, when I see, I've been in the United States many times, and I visited office of colleagues and took courses in the United States, attended the American Congress several times. The basic point is this one: many patients in the United States, they would never seek treatment in Europe.
And why is that?
Because people have got a different level of tolerance or attention, call it as you want, for their own smile. Meaning that you have, as a culture, the idea that, and I like it, don't misunderstand me, that you must have a nice smile with perfect teeth, and so it's not so. There are many countries in Europe in which there is not such an attention.
You know who's more focused on cosmetics, whiter, brighter, perfect teeth than the United States by far?
What you mean by state or
no,
which
around the world?
group?
Around the world. You know which country? You know which region would be number one?
Most likely, I don't know, Korea or Brazil.
No, it's the Middle East. When you're a woman and the only thing that shows is your face. I mean, I've had oh my gosh, I've been there myself. I mean, if that's the only thing that shows, that's going to be spot on perfect. But if so they're obsessed. There's not a white enough tooth in the Middle East.
Yes.
Yeah. So the Middle East makes Americans look like Europe. Do you have you been in this a long time? Do you see the European demand for whiter, brighter, straighter teeth slowly increasing, or do you think it's plateaued? Or
no, it's increasing. Well, I would say that since we have more upside than United States in a sense, and so it's increasing definitely. It's increasing also because culturally there is quite a domination of the United States. I mean, music, movies. The model is that one that you see, and it's coming more and more, and the demand for cosmetic is increasing definitely.
So when I wanted to start that you started an orthodontic company where Get Project, as local speakers in 12 countries and 13 new countries are going to be added. So is the Get Project, is that for other orthodontists or for general dentists?
No, it's for other orthodontists. And even though we must specify one thing, there are some countries in which there is no formal education to become an orthodontist. For example, Austria, the first one that comes to my mind. And in those countries, of course, we are open also to dentists. And this project is a project that is a project in which we are supported by GC. So I have to say this to be transparent. I must also say that it's a Japanese company and it's a family company, so they are not so pushy in asking to be a salesman. So we are let very free to try to do our best to build a teaching system that is just trying to give a honest message.
Do you feel, a lot of Americans feel, and I agree, that when you're learning to become a dentist and you're in dental school, the endodontists try to teach you everything they know, the oral surgeons, everybody tries to teach you and help you do everything, but the orthodontist, not so much. Do you agree with that assessment or do you disagree?
Well, sometimes that happens also in the specialty school. It's not only in dental school, it's also afterwards sometimes.
What example do you have? What are you talking about?
I'm talking that in some countries, I don't want to make names, but in some countries that I know very well, even during the specialty school, the postgraduate training in orthodontics, you are not taught as much as you should. So
yeah, so
it's not a problem only. It's not only a problem only of dental school, but of course in dental school there is this attitude that is more marked due to the fact that there is a specialty. And in most countries, I don't know United States in which states it's like this, but in Europe, in most countries, the only two specialties recognized for dentists are orthodontics and oral surgery.
For most countries?
Yes.
Most countries in Europe only have two specialties, orthodontics and oral surgery?
Yeah. Those are the two that are formally recognized.
And do you think that list will increase over time? I mean, United States has 10. We just added it'll be 1 year next week. I think it's March 11th will be the 1 year anniversary of the new dental anesthesiology. Do you think specialization will slowly keep increasing in Europe?
I think so. Because that is the model that we're going to. I don't know how it will look, our professional landscape in 25 years from now. But I think if I had to bet, I would bet against the single practitioner practice, because I simply don't think it's possible nowadays to keep updates in all different fields and to keep being proficient in all different fields. It's getting more and more complicated. So I think there will be multidisciplinary centers, maybe clusters of multidisciplinary centers, 5, 6, 7, so to optimize administrative costs. And close to that, there will be some big chains, of course, that they will survive. But I think this is going more or less to be the landscape in 25 years from now.
Right. I think the future of dentistry will continue to become more patient-focused and away from being dentist-focused. And the dentists don't realize it. I mean, like you'll look at their hours and they'll say, what are your hours? And they'll say Monday through Thursday, 8 to 5. And I'll say, do you think that's patient-focused or dentist-focused? And then when you go into the doctor and they say, okay, well, you need to drive across town and go here and wait and keep getting in line. You just go from line to line to line. So retail for 200 years, the business model has always been each generation the stores keep getting bigger, and I think they've obviously peaked out. And you go back to 1800. Most people, the shop was downstairs and they lived upstairs, and it just kept slowly getting bigger and bigger. And I think about 200,000 square feet was the maximum for Walmart, IKEA, Costco, Price Club, all these things. And then it was so big, people thought, well, I don't want to shop there. That's like that's not convenient. So even Walmart has admitted that they got that's as big as they can get per store, and they're drifting down towards small stores. But the only 3 dental offices, group practices that are publicly traded in the markets that I'm aware of, is 2 in Australia, 1 in Singapore. They all have the same business model. They're 7 to 7, 7 days a week. But you're saying, but you think the specialty centers will become more popular?
Yes, I think the doctors will need to offer this kind of service. If you don't want to be employed by a big chain, you will have to try to agree with other colleagues in different specialty, and maybe open not only one center, maybe a group of 3 or 4 centers, because there is an economy of scale up to a certain number. Over a certain number, for me, is difficult to see, but up to a number of 4 or 5 centers can be economy of scale.
Right. I think the scale that well, first of all, as far as the specialty question, I asked you, you said most countries in Europe only have 2 specialties, orthodontics and neurosurgery. In 1900, the United States had 0, and healthcare was 1% of the GDP. By the year 2000, it was 14% of the GDP, and there was 9 specialties in dentistry and 58 in medicine. I think it'll have to expand because there's just too much knowledge you have to know.
Yes,
I mean, these young dentists comes out of school and they have no historical understanding of specializing, and they think they're going to place an implant once a month and retreat a failed root canal once a month and do silver diamond floor. It's like, good Lord, pick a range, and the tighter that range, the better you're going to get.
And
that means group practice.
Yeah, and there is another little problem, that this is only at the top of the iceberg, meaning that this is the technical skills that you need to possess. Then there is the rest, because at the very end of the day, we concentrate very much. As you said, I heard you saying this many times, and you're totally right, that we concentrate so much on the technical part, and we leave the rest, which contributes probably 90% to our survival. Because, I don't know, I believe that for the patient, what counts at the very end of the day, it's accessibility, convenience, and experience. And that is what you have to try to offer. And the technical skills, your technical proficiency is taken for granted. That's my feeling, that patients assume, and rightfully so, that you must be able to solve their problems. You must have ethic, you must be skilled. But then it's the rest that makes a difference, and we are absolutely non-trained for that.
I believe exactly what you said, with one slight nuance, and that's the generations. All the publicly traded DSOs tell me that the older people like me, they know that there are good doctors and bad. My friend had a root canal and had to be pulled. This guy's better. They all know about that. But the millennials who grew up with fluoride in the water and the toothpaste and haven't had hardly any dentistry, they compare it to healthcare. Like when someone has an emergency and they take them to the hospital, that the millennials never talk about, well, which hospital did you go to? Which doctor did you see? They assume if you had to be rushed to the hospital to take your appendix out, well, that's what hospitals do. They know how to take your appendix out. Just like if you took your car into the dealer and needed a new transmission, they do that. But so the millennials have put our quality got so high that millennials put it into a commodity, which means it's not differentiated on anything other than price, and which then leads to accessibility and convenience. Thus, they're more loyal to themselves. Thus, the 24 hours a day, or 7 to 7 days a week for accessibility and convenience, better locations is a big thing. I want to ask you another cultural thing. When I got out of school in '87, in the United States, a dentist couldn't even advertise until 1973, when actually a couple of lawyers in Tucson took out an advertisement, and the Arizona bar said you can't do that and threatened to take their license away, and it went all the way to Supreme Court. And they argued it was free speech, and that case opened up the whole Pandora's box. Then I got out in '87, and at that time, just going into a retail location and doing direct mail, the older guys thought I just some crazy young guy, why is he doing that? But I always sensed that Europe was even more conservative than America in business. Do you think that's still the same, or do you think that's changing?
Well, Europe is very, very heterogeneous. You have a place like UK, in which they are very aggressive with advertisement. There are places like Germany, in which basically you cannot advertise at all. And there is everything in between. So to say about Europe is a bit difficult to talk about it as one concept. is very different from country to country here. Generally speaking, it's more conservative, if we want to make a general assumption. It's definitely more conservative than the United States, but not only in terms of rules and regulations, but also in terms of response of the public to that. Meaning that there are still, especially in the older generations, the idea that a doctor that make advertisement, especially if it's like advertisement that is not only saying, hey, I'm there, but something more than that, is not seen as so good. I repeat, in some older generations in some countries, because Europe is very different. An Italian like me and someone born in Finland, I don't know, we are very, very different.
So what is let's talk about your gettheconcept.com. It's get,
yes.
It's get. Is that a dash or a hyphen you call it? What's that little line there?
It's minus, I would call it.
You call it a minus? Okay.
Yes.
So get minus the minus concept.com. So what is gettheconcept.com? What is the concept?
The concept is this one. That's, in orthodontics, basically what is happening is like generally for dentistry. I'm always surprised that people tend to concentrate on the 2% that is their activity. If you go to congresses, courses, and so on, everybody wants to shine or maybe sell you something. And you get shown again and again and again cases that are borderline, that you see in real life twice per year. And this, I think, especially for young professionals that they need continuing education, it's a bit detrimental because you don't really learn to increase the average level of your work. Because we are a medical profession. A medical profession is a statistical profession. We have to be very good in treating 98% of our patients. We don't have to be able to make the Hail Mary in the 2%. And most congresses and courses, they concentrate on making the Hail Mary on the last 2%.
I agree. You go to any dental conference, and their only class they'll teach on implants is the all-on-4, invented up the street from you in Portugal by Palo Malo. And it's this big old case, and then you go over to the prosthodontist lecture, and it's all full mouth rehab. And I've stood up, 10 times in 30 years. And I'm just curious. Raise your hand if you haven't done one full mouth rehab this year, and all the hands go up. And then you had an implant course. Raise your hand if you've never done an all-on-4. They all go up. And it's not sexy to do a course on all-on-none. And so, they're not going to have a denture class when you could have Palo Malos come up there and show all those cases. So you're right. They don't teach bread and butter dentistry. They teach, as you call, the Hail Mary pass. That's
Hail Mary pass. And also, I think that they have to teach not only bread and butter, but how to become really good on average, because you are a very good orthodontist if you can do a good average job on 100 cases. It doesn't matter that you make one exceptional case and then you treat 30 so-and-so, 30 you have to hide them because you try to do borderline things where you shouldn't, and so on. So that is very important. And GET stands for Goals, Evidence, Treatment, meaning that we try to define goals according to real life and what is our ideal that we want to achieve. And then we take a look at the evidence that we have available, because, in orthodontics, evidence is a bit, you have to have a critical appraisal to that, because it's not like periodontology that you can measure. Orthodontics is much less measurable. And then there is the treatment, that is having treatment protocols that must help you in becoming a good orthodontist that can treat properly the majority of patients. So in daily life, in a real life, because real life means also that you will have to be able to treat also a certain number of patients. You cannot see 2 patients per day, because nobody's going to pay for that, basically.
So the GET stands for what? Goals?
Goals, evidence, and treatment.
Evidence and treatment. And then the other thing that's so serious is that so many people try to they jump in and they want to do this case, and they don't realize that the most important part is the diagnosis and treatment plan. And you have a lot of courses in America where, they have short-term ortho, one-day Invisalign classes. And when dentists tell me they're going to do that, I say, well, really, if you can learn ortho in one day, you should go tell everybody applying to ortho school and get rid of that.
But I don't know, my feeling is that if you want to be a successful speaker, you have to understand that you should sell hope. And that's what most people do. Hope to become financially successful, hope to be recognized by your peers, and by selling hope, they try to sell one recipe for hope, not realizing that financial success or recognition from your peers, clinical skills, and whatever you want to add is always a combination of 100 different factors that you have to take care of. There is not one recipe. But whenever I can see that someone try to sell one recipe, is always trying to sell hope in real life.
Well, you went to school in Rome. I mean, my two oldest sisters are Catholic nuns, and the oldest one, they jumped on the opportunity to start doing translations. This goes back 30 years ago. In fact, I bought her the first Mac she was telling me what she was doing. I said, why don't you get a Mac? And she goes, oh, Howie, those are too much money. And so I gave her a Mac. Oh, my God. It was love at first sight. And so, religion is hope. I mean, people just don't want to sit around and think that as soon as it's over, it's over. So I love when you said that GET stood for, the GET means goals, evidence, and treatment. It's kind of interesting historically because in Rome, astronomy left astrology. I mean, Galileo spent the last 7 years of his life because the Pope did not want to hear that the sun did not go around Rome. Chemistry left alchemy when they realized they're not going to make gold. Dentistry left floss. I mean, there's a whole thread on Dental Town. There is just no evidence for floss, but it's fun watching them because it's like talking to my sister about religion. You can just tell by the way they're talking about it, they're not going to let this one go. It's gonna slowly fade a little bit over generations, but it's kind of funny because when the nullius in verba, Latin for on the word of no one, or take nobody's word for it, is the motto of the Royal Society that John Evelyn started in 1620 when he started realizing that healthcare was all filled with so many non-truthful shenanigans, and he wanted to say we need to become evidence-based. But I think in 2020, you can't even find the evidence to floss. Do you see evidence-based dentistry changing orthodontics?
Well, as I said, in orthodontics is a bit more complicated because you cannot really measure so good. Number one. Number two, there is not even uniformity about the aims of our treatment, meaning that one thing if you want just to measure the overjet, another thing if you want to look at the face, not to say the function and the relation with the occlusion. I try to be as objective as I can, meaning that I don't want to be someone because my fear is that nowadays there are two parties. There are the extremists of evidence, for which the evidence is the holy book, and not realizing that evidence is not necessarily the truth. You have to have a critical appraisal to what is written because that's necessary. But on the other hand, I don't want to be one of the clinicians that says, well, it doesn't matter what is in evidence. This is what I see in my daily activity, because that is a very dangerous path. Because if we decide to leave evidence totally, then it's only an opinion matter. And my opinion is as good as the opinion of someone that I don't know says that changing the appliance that you wear will influence your dreams.
So and that you see that all the time in dentistry. It's one of the biggest comebacks in dentistry. It's kind of like murdered by words. It's like, okay, so it works in your hands, but not in anybody else's hands. It can't be repeated. Yeah. It's a goal. When you say orthodontics is hard to measure, especially the aim or goal of the treatment, go back to that. Why do you think it's hard to measure, especially the aim or goal of the treatment?
Well, because there is not a uniformity on that, meaning that we are back what we have about the occlusion. We have the 6 keys of Andrews, we have the classification of angle, and that's it. But what about the face of a patient? What about the impact that we have on that? What about the impact on function? Many things are not so easy to measure, whereas in periodontology, you measure a pocket, that's it. That's a very, very easy and also definitive way to look at things. In orthodontics, you may improve the overjet, but worsen the profile of a patient, for example. And then it depends what you're measuring. And then you have to measure, recently I read an article, they were measuring the impact of functional appliances, and they were reporting as statistically significant that there was an improvement over several years of something like 1 point something millimeter. And then you think, well, we're talking about an overjet that improves of 1.5 millimeter over a span of 4 years. And you think it's statistically significant, but is that a clinical success?
Do you also agree that some people are always arguing that orthodontics is necessary and they're mad insurance won't pay for it. Now, I always say, come on, I live in the United States. We're 1/3 obese now, and we're supposed to be half the population will be obese. I have friends and family. I remember when I was in dental school, I got to go to a Ferran family funeral, and one of my uncles didn't have a tooth in his head, and he was just eating almonds and crunching and crunching. I was in dental school. So I asked him, he's a tall man. I asked him if I could stand on the kneeler at church, we were in the back, and watch him eat a single almond. And because I was in dental school, and his ridges were calloused. And so the question is orthodontics, what percent of orthodontics is just cosmetic and trying to be pretty like a peacock and increase your chance of mating success and getting a better job and all that stuff, versus what percent of it is actual medical treatment where we have the research to say if this child is not treated, it'll have a less quality life outcome?
When you talk about less quality life outcome, we have to define what we define, what we talk about, because as you correctly pointed out, we can live basically without teeth. And actually, I can tell you a story that in Denmark, up to, maybe before the war, it was used for the girl that had to get married to have all teeth extracted, and the family of the girl would give a denture as present, because in this way, the man would not have to pay for dental care the rest of the life. So, is dentistry necessary for survival? Is not. Is quality of life. And then if we talk about it, orthodontics is necessary to, for example, avoid the tooth decay, because class 3, for example, if you bite edge to edge, you will abrade your incisor over time. If you bite in your palate, you will tend to compromise the gingiva behind the central incisors over time. So there are some functional indication to prevent degradation of the dentition. But in real life, of course, a lot of patients, they come only because they want to have straight teeth. That is their motivation.
And I always, one of my rules that I run everything through, when someone's saying something and and it's like me seeing a giraffe for the first time, the first thing I always do is I just inverse it. Like, you say 1 + 1 is 2. So then you say, okay, well, is 2 - 1 1? Multiplication followed by division. When you say is orthodontics medically necessary, what is a medical tragedy that I've seen if they don't have orthodontics in a social setting, in a social species like humans, where looks is very important. I've seen people with very disfigured faces have a negative impact on their personality, their development, their friends, their bullying. So I guess if you look like you could eat corn on the cob through a chain link fence, it might not be fun to go through grammar school and high school and college.
There are studies that have been done that they prove that the less appealing is your smile, the less chances you have in dating, which is not surprising, but also in getting a job. It was done an experiment in Denmark in which dental students were sent around having job interviews with their normal smile or with a smile alterated artificially. And there was a difference in outcome of the interviews.
So really orthodontics may be, would you say it might be the most medically necessary if it impacts the patient's mental health? Do you think that's where it shows up the most? Do you think there's more negatives from not having for emotional health than there are positives from having it done
for sure. I mean, I wouldn't sit here if I was not convinced that it's a good thing. To me, the main benefit is actually you prevent degradation of the dentition, so you prevent future problems. That is the main point. But of course, there is also a main value in correcting and increasing the well-being of people. Again, this is culturally related. In some countries, it's more accentuated than others. Like the benefit of having a good smile is for sure higher, just to make an example, in United States rather than United Kingdom. It's a question just of the average level of dental care and attention to the dentition.
And when you say teeth, if you weren't a dentist, it's always hair, nails, and teeth. I mean, I don't care if they're talking about rhinos or elephants, hair, nails, and teeth. But I remember, for me, when I started out on the lecture circuit, it was actually, this is going to be my third year. It was August 4th, 1990. But I remember the first time I spoke for the Royal College of Dentists in London. And I was at this hotel, and I was out there, and this green Lamborghini, Jaguar, pulls up, and this girl gets out on the driver's side, and she's got a long dress that matches the car. I mean, to say she was beautiful, I mean, it was just the most. It looked like something out of Hollywood. And when she walked by, she smiled, and she was missing a tooth. And then the next day at my lecture, there were several dentists that I could see while I was lecturing that I could see missing teeth. But the most bizarre thing was hair. Because like the Mona Lisa, the reason everybody looks at it like there's something about that, it's because she shaved off her eyebrows. And then that moved to shaving legs. And then, so women have been, and men have been changing what they shave and don't shave. And I think it's, I just thought it was amazing that she could have spent all that money on the dress, all that money on the car, and was perfectly fine missing a bicuspid, which, which is just, I just thought that was wild.
Yeah. Well, for me, I've been working in different countries with very different systems.
Which countries? Italy?
Oh, I've been working in Italy, Denmark, Norway, Germany, Switzerland. And one thing that I noticed is that this culture is also originated by the system, the healthcare system that is in every place. Meaning that, for example, Denmark is a place in which the tax that people have to pay are extremely high. So it's a rich country in which the government is rich, but people are poor. The government will pay orthodontic treatment only to the 25% most severe cases, which means that if your kid has got only some crowding in the upper arch, it will not get the treatment paid by the government. And people don't have the money in their pocket to pay an orthodontic treatment private very often, because once again, when you are taxed 67% of your income, you don't have much left. And therefore, what happens there is that they have an expression that when someone has got, for example, a kid has got some crowding, the family will tell him, oh, but that's his charm. They call it a charm. So that is when a financial and the organizatory thing gets into a cultural thing.
Well, let's I really want to take a deep dive on that because in America, you just cannot discuss religion, sex, politics, or violence. It just there's 331 million Americans, and they're all synced on instant social media, whatever. So it's just too volatile. But when you go to an American and you say, "Hey, how would you like to have your taxes go up?" and the government will be in charge of your housing. You won't ever have to worry about a house again. They laugh. No. I mean car. You'll never have to buy a car again. The government will do all your transportation, and they laugh. You say, hey, what about food? There'll just be government cafeterias. They laugh. And then you say, well, what do you think they should take over? And they say, well, I don't know. I'm following Bernie Sanders in this healthcare thing. I have an MBA from Arizona State University, so I'm as brainwashed from Milton Friedman as my oldest sisters are in Catholicism. But I want to. What are your thoughts on? Do you think the healthcare system, like the United States, should it have a healthcare system like all the countries you have worked in the past, Italy, Denmark, Germany, and now Zurich, Switzerland? What is your honest assessment from real life living?
My honest assessment is that extremes are wrong. The best system that I know, that I've seen how it works, is actually the one in Switzerland. Switzerland, it works like this. Every person must make a private insurance. It's mandatory. And then for those people who cannot afford it, government will take care of them, which has got the advantage of covering everybody, but having a private model which is more efficient than a pure public one, and at the same time securing that everybody will have a coverage, meaning that the poor people that cannot afford it, they will be taken care of. The rest of us has got to make a private insurance, and this will be used on a private system, because I've been working in a pure public system, and that is also presents very high inefficiency. And the highest inefficiency is given by the human nature, for which if I give you something for free, you will value the thing zero.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's I agree that after World War II, a lot of countries came on with a socialized medicine system. And then they went from 1950. It started really a lot with Winston Churchill, who said, when we rebuild this country, it's not going to help if everybody's sick and uneducated. So let's get them sick. Let's get them healthy and educated. So they started public schools and hospitals in a big way. And then they ran their course for 50 years. What I was most interested in is then the last couple countries like Taiwan and Singapore, where they didn't develop theirs till after the year 2000. So they studied everyone else. And I thought it was interesting that they said that they both came to the conclusion that they didn't take any ideas from America. But in looking at the systems in Canada, Australia, and all throughout Europe and all that stuff, there were a lot of details that were far more efficient. But over here, we're next to Canada. So Canadians are always saying, oh, yeah, my dad went in and he had a bypass and he didn't even have a bill. And it's like, okay, what economic theory would recommend that the customer has no skin in the game, doesn't shop for price, doesn't look for price value? When you just give out government free cheese, I went to dental school in Kansas City, and they had a food clinic there, and they give out these 5-pound bricks of cheese to the poor. Well, guess what? The most favorite ball to use in your tag game in a front yard was a 5-pound block of cheese, and I saw one lady stacking them up for a shelf. I mean, when cheese is free, people don't they don't value it. So you have to have them have some skin in the game. But in the politics of the day, if you said, well, every American, all healthcare, you'll just have a 5% or 10% copayment. I'd recommend a 10% because then you just have everyone could figure it out in their head. When you go 5%, you're going to have to reach for your smartphone. But if you said a 10% copayment, people would just think you were insane. But I've already seen this in the American cash market, where when the patient has 100% copayment, they'll say, well, I went to the doctor and an artificial hip was going to be $75,000. Well, I called my sister Jolene in Missouri, and she's in a small town, and I could get it done for $45,000 there. So to save $30,000, I'm going to fly home and stay with my sister for a month. But when you have no copayment, you have none of that. Secondly, you have nobody looking at embezzlement. So when no one looks at the bill,
No.
so when you came in for a hip transplant, I could have charged you for knees too, and you never even would have looked at the bill because there's no skin in the game. So there's a lot of details. I believe that the final model
There is misuse of the system. In many of the countries which I've been living and working, in which the system was totally public, you would see people going to the emergency for a cold. Why? Because you can. Because for you is for free. You tend not to estimate the cost of what you're getting.
The other thing I don't like about free is the United States healthcare system, very fragmented on information, but everyone who's ever did a deep dive on it says that the iatrogenic deaths caused by the hospital, where you come into the hospital and you die from something you didn't come in for, is over 200,000 people a year. Everything I look in pharmacology says by the time you get to polyphagia, they're killing you. Yeah, so when people are arguing for free hospitals and free prescriptions, I'm like, well, why don't you just throw in drugs too? I mean, give them free marijuana, So I don't know if I have enough faith in hospitals and pharmacy to make all that stuff free. I don't want my 5 grandchildren every time something goes wrong reaching for a pill or driving to the hospital.
No, absolutely. And also the problem is that it's much easier to point at the big elephant and say, oh, there are people who cannot afford healthcare, rather than to look at the misuse that can be of a pure public system. As I said, I think that a mixed solution, the one that I see here in Switzerland, it seems to work pretty good. Whoever works, who has got a normal life, is mandatory to have a private insurance, and a private insurance works on a co-payment system, meaning that you will always to participate to your expenses. And then, for the rest of people, the one that cannot afford it, the state takes over. That's it. I think that is a very good solution.
And the population of Switzerland's about what? 9.5, 10 million?
8.5.
8.5 million. So I live next to Mexico. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. We border Mexico. When you talk about systems like that, the range of how many people live in this country today and have lived here for a long time is between 10 and 30 million people. So if we implemented that system, we could have 1 to 3 Switzerlands living under the so it's just I look at all these solutions, and I think one of the things that the first thing I see is that China's $1.3 billion, India's $1.1 billion, the next is United States is 1/3 of $1 billion, and things are so different when a country's that large.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And the borders.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a so back to Get. How's it go? How's it going?
It's going totally fine. We are training local speakers, so we have local speakers up to now. With this year we're getting up to 25 countries totally, and the idea is to have local organization, local courses. We have an online activity rather high. We have a webinar course.
And what's the
online?
What's the online? Is that the website?
We have
Get the concept?
Yes, we have a webinar course that is like 30 webinars, and that is because we want to give a general knowledge about orthodontics, because I think it's good for everybody, and I don't like the idea that I think the dentists, they should know something about orthodontics, and I think it's in the interest of orthodontics that dentists know something about orthodontics. Because let's talk it out clear. If a dentist wants to treat patients with aligners, he will do that, no matter that I like it or not. But it's nice that to me, it's important that they know what they're doing and they know what are the limits also, and which cases can be dangerous to treat for the patient and for the doctor.
Yes, when I decided I wanted to learn implants, I didn't even want to learn implants. I was mad because to get my fellowship in the AGD, I had to have like 30 hours in implants and ortho, and I didn't want to do either. And so it was a lot of hours, and there was no dental school in Arizona at the time. Now there's 2, but I had to fly to Pittsburgh. And the greatest thing about flying to Pittsburgh is I never I was still doing 3-unit bridges because my belief in a sinus lift when I came out of school in 1987, that you were a butcher and that was a really bad idea. And it took Carl Misch 7 3-day weekends before I realized that was better. So I just want all my homies to get an A in diagnosing and treatment planning. And my gosh, I took the ortho curriculum from Richard Litt, and he was a board certified orthodontist. Do you know Richard Litt?
Yeah.
He's the only him and in my backyard, Harry Green. They're the only two board certified trained orthodontists who ever taught general dentists in the United States. And my gosh, most of the class that I went through that with, none of them do any ortho again. But the greatest thing was diagnosing and treatment planning. The greatest thing was when a mom asks you a question about her daughter, and her daughter's only 7, and you're supposed to be able to predict the future when Einstein's telling you there is no past or future. You only have the present, and you're trying to figure out what this kid's going to look like in 5 or 10 years. So yeah, the knowledge of it is so important to be cross-trained.
Yes, absolutely. And I think actually us orthodontists interest first. Because, of course, if we want to have that the dentist, that orthodontics grow as a specialty, as numbers, the more people are interested in that, the better it is.
So on your online, do you care if it's a dentist or a general dentist? Or, with the internet, what I love the most about the internet is it's going to kill nationalism. I mean, when Steve Jobs stuck the internet into the smartphone, it was the biggest game changer that I've seen. So now that with the internet, and there's 8 billion people, and 2 million of them are dentists, and in any country you go to, the dentists are the most likely to have in the top 5% of education and income, and they all have a smartphone, and I've been to 50 of them. So do you care or put downward pressures, or if that person taking those online courses is indeed not an orthodontist?
Well, no. As I say, the idea is to get some orthodontic knowledge spread. And the point is also that I think internet is changing the way that we teach. Because whereas like 20 years ago, if you were on a podium, you could teach a technique, or you could show data, you should show some articles. Nowadays, the new doctors, they can find every kind of information online. And I think that your role as an educator is changing. Your role in an educator is not so much to just report informations, but to filter informations according to a bigger experience that you have, and so working as a filter, actually.
So is how is the online, what is getting more traction, online or in person? What seems to be the bigger hit?
It's a mixture. It's a mixture because online has got still one limit, I think, and that will always have, is the if I give you a 8 hours online course, you have to find 8 hours to sit in front of a screen and to watch it. And I think that as human beings, for us, it's a bit more difficult than to sit in a room with other people watching someone speaking. Not to mention the social aspect, that dentists, they like to travel, they like to meet peers, they like to exchange opinions. So I don't think that the life experience will die, but one has got to understand that it's got to change. If I'm in front of an audience live and I give them the same kind of information that they can get just by going online, it doesn't make sense. I have to give them something different.
I agree. I agree that you are a summary of the 5 people you hang around with the most. So if you live in a dysfunctional house, if you live in violence, if you live in a drug community, it's so hard to get out of it. And a lot of dentists come out of school and they're still hanging out with their 4 drinking friends who hated dentistry and they hated everything. And when you go to a course like that, you start hanging out with people who are going for it, and it rubs off on you. And I still think that is the number one correlator that I've seen measured to success, is the number of hours of CE. So, so we started online CE. By the way, I think the best marketing you could do on your course, on your website, you have a free online course a free trial. My God, you should put that free trial on Dental Town, because on Dental Town,
Absolutely.
well, there's no, to the date, only Richard Litt or Harry Green would do that. And the other ones all had to be outside of the United States, because you will get blackballed if you do that in the United States. So the teacher would have to be from another tribe. And why not someone who is clear on the other side of the planet, where the other 7 out of 8 people live? America is kind of funny. The Americas together don't even have 1 billion. Europe's 1 billion. Africa's 1 billion.
Yeah.
So the game
But
is.
I think that still United States is like, I don't know if this number is correct, but what I've heard once is that United States alone accounts 70% of the whole dental market in the world.
I would challenge that. I always hear for the basics, cleaning exams, X-rays, dental chairs, processors, materials, all that. It's always 30 to 40% the U.S., the same amount Europe, and then the rest of the world. I'll give you an example here in my backyard. There's a huge Spanish, 2 Spanish networks, Telemundo and another one, and they're just huge, and they cover all the Spanish-speaking world. So the United States and Canada, there's 350 million speaking English. Portugal's about 200 million speaking, Brazil, 200 million speaking Portuguese, but there's about 500 million Spanish people. Well, the CEOs and the marketing dependents say they only do it for the 50 million Spanish speakings in America, and that's where they make their money, that's where they make their sales, and they know that commercial is being shown from the border all the way down to the tip of Argentina, but they don't even care. So there's 2 million dentists on Earth, and I would say it's a third U.S., and all U.S. data in dentistry includes Canada and not Mexico, and then a third Europe, and then a third the rest of the world. So that's what everybody seems to be saying on this show. But what else is different? What are the other major differences between the U.S. and European market? Because you thought the U.S. dental market was much bigger than the European market. What other differences do you think there are?
Well, the size of the clinics, because for what I've seen, I took some management courses in the United States mostly, and the size of the clinic that I've seen is significantly different. In Europe, there are still very small offices, especially in places like Italy or Spain. You will find an office with 1 operator and 1 chair or 2 chairs, which is something that I think United States, from my feeling, is relatively uncommon now.
Yeah, and so when you go to Tokyo, where it's $1 million a square meter, you can have 4 dentists working in a place that's the size of a break room. So yeah, America has its huge land, so land was not a very limiting factor. In fact, the only place you see high-rise in the United States is where the population got dammed up next to a river or a mountain or an ocean. But if you go to a city like Phoenix or Dallas that's not surrounded by any mountains or oceans or anything like that, there's not even 100 elevators in this whole town.
And I love the United States. One thing that has got respect to Europe is that you guys, you understood the importance of protocols. Meaning that when you want to run a clinic, you need to have protocols and auditing. Otherwise, you cannot run it in an efficient way. This is something that Europe is not so much looked on, which I disagree, because I think that at the very end of the day, we reflect also on the clinical work. Europeans tend to think that everything that is management and administration and protocols is something that, yes, it's bit business. It's not doctor-wise. Or doctor-like, sorry. But to me, at the very end of the day, the organization will also reflect on the work, the quality of the work that you produce at the very end. And this one is something that you guys have mastered absolutely, and we can learn from United States.
Yeah, I think my takeaways from the dental industry, because I've I always love seeing where everything's made. So like the first time I lectured in your country, I got to tell you my embarrassing dumb American deal. So it was the first time I lectured in Switzerland, and that mountain, I don't even know what it's called. I said to the guy driving me, I said, God, that's so gorgeous. And I'm looking at it. I said, it almost looks like the Matterhorn in Disneyland. And he looks over at me and goes, "It is." And I'm like, "Really? That was named after a real mountain?" I just thought, I thought Walt Disney, I thought he'd come up with that like Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck, but the guy just thought, he goes, what's the name of that mountain?
Yeah, that's what you're saying. Matterhorn.
Matterhorn?
Yeah.
Is that just that peak, or is that the range, or?
No, it's the mountain.
Just the mountain, yeah. Gorgeous, just unbelievable. But for going around these countries, I always see the same thing. Like you go to, talk about Switzerland. The company who brought me in there to speak for their study club, they were making a curing light. It was a really powerful curing light at the time. This is 30 years ago. And composites were taken off big and everything. And he didn't even have a marketing person. He didn't have a marketing department, and he did no advertising. And he was reaching out to me because I was an American key opinion leader, and he wanted me to blah blah blah. You go to, but his little bitty company making lights had 6 full-time PhDs. Well, I could name you 10 companies in America that do 50 to 100 million in sales and don't even have one PhD, but they'll have a call center. You'll go in there and they'll have 50 people sitting in a deal on a thermometer, and everybody's dialing for dollars, and the first person who makes a sale gets a pass to, a Starbucks coffee or whatever. And then you go to China, and they're just so obsessed with making it so cheap that they just make it so cheap that their quality becomes unacceptable. So it's always, Europe needs to learn how to advertise. And this still thing I hold against China is that Korea has Samsung, they have IKEA, Samsung and LG. They have lots of brand names that every American knows that this car Hyundai is made in Korea. Japan has the best brand names in the world: Honda, Toyota, etc. I said, name one Chinese brand name in America that people go to Walmart and know that their favorite product from here is a brand from China. So China needs brands, and that's only going to come from increasing their quality, not just continue to make it cheaper. And Americans, my God, that they could sell snow to an Eskimo.
You can sell and organize, because the amazing thing of if you look at the European office, especially Germany and Switzerland, you will visit the office. I don't know if you ever did. But if you visit an office in Germany or Switzerland, you will be amazed. It's really high-end design, the quality of furniture, the quality of the chairs, the quality of everything. It's very high-end, more than United States. But the functioning, the way they are organized, we have to learn a lot of things. There are still offices around Europe that they close the telephone at lunchtime, that they have telephone hours. And it's not because they are at capacity. They need patience, but they still have telephone times. Why? Because the lady that is in the front desk likes it like that. This is the situation, and this is the thing that I try to fight a little bit.
It's interesting because I made a post yesterday on Dental Town. There's a nice thread going on about what you're talking about, standard operating procedures. And what I'm always telling dentists, that what they don't understand, and what I've been able to observe for 3 decades, is that when you have a really motivated, super successful person like yourself, and they're in a dental office and they're doing all these things, they don't realize that it doesn't pass the Mack truck test. And the Mack truck test is you're on your way to work and you get ran over by a Mack truck. Then you find out how strong this business is. And if the founder dies, the business goes out and gone. So they didn't develop what you just talked about, standard operation procedures. I had a dentist call me this morning. He's thinking about starting his 3rd location. And I asked him how much dentistry he was doing. He's like, well, I'm doing about $2 million a year in my first one, me personally, and $1 million in the other one. I said, you don't even know if you have a healthy organization, because you want to make a DSO. But right now, you don't have a DSO. You have a really amazing workaholic maniac producer. But I said, but we don't know what that's going to be after you're ran over by a Mack truck. I said, look at everybody in America that has over 500 offices hasn't practiced dentistry in 30 years. Look at Herb Kelleher at Southwest Airlines. He never even became a pilot. I swear to God, if Southwest Airlines would have been Dental Airlines, the dentist would have got his is diplomat and implants and he just would have been in diplomat training school his whole life. And they asked Herb Kelleher, they say, why did you not learn how to fly? And he goes, well, I can hire a pilot to do that. And the Herb Kelleher of dentistry in America, Steve Thorne, his dad was a dentist. And his brother said, come on, dude, let's go to dental school. And he's like, why would I spend 8 years in dental school when it would take me 8 minutes to find a dentist and hire him? And now his dad still has one office, and Steve has 500 without becoming a dentist, because the business of dentistry, HR, marketing, legal, all the disciplines of finding a location, attracting and retaining staff, developing standard operation procedures. I mean, you go into a dental office right now and forget the dentist being ran over by a Mack truck. Let's say the dental assistant doesn't come in, and you have a temporary come in. The first thing she's going to learn is that every single room is set up differently. How would that work in an airline company if every time they got in an airplane, everything was in a different place? So Americans are good at that. That is true. That is the backbone of business. Your focus, the business of dentistry, and I don't think it's related to quality. I've seen some of the worst quality come out of. They're just not associated.
No. I don't think it's a good thing that it's not, but it is what it is. And I think that the problem of dentists is that very often we tend to overestimate the importance that we have for the patients, meaning that I think everybody's got to be to make an effort to be likable and to give himself as much as possible. But nevertheless, the idea that we can afford to hold our telephone closed or to be open only certain hours where the competition doesn't, and then people will still choose us because we think that we are so awesome, is something that we have to forget a little bit. Because especially, as you say, the new generation that need to see us as a commodity, and they will just go to the next one.
So are you going to get pushback from orthodontists in Switzerland? How many orthodontists are in Switzerland?
The answer is the same as in any other country, too many.
Like how many? So you got 8.5 million people. How many orthodontists would you guess?
Oh, I think something like 300.
300? Well,
400.
Will your own tribe, when you start going back to tribal events, will you feel any downward pressure from doing what you're doing? Sharing the knowledge of the secrets of the orthodontic temple?
No, I don't think so, because it's so fragmented in Europe because there is the language barrier. I mean, what I do what I do in English. There are many people they speak English maybe, but they will not normally look for a website in English, for example. Europe is not like United States, and this is something that we dreamt to become like United States in terms of political terms, like a confederation of states, but we can't because there are some differences. Like one is an example is language. There are too many different languages. So I don't experience that, no.
And do you think do you see in your lifetime? But by the way, you said orthodontics, the only medical necessary was like cosmetics or
no. I say no. It's also the prevention.
Right. But is that why you're single? You didn't have orthodontic treatment when you were little, and you were never able to find. You have to be a rich man to have remained single all this time. But do you think that in your lifetime, living in Rome and Denmark and Switzerland, do you see the Europe drifting towards a common language? For instance, I'll give you an example. When I got to Arizona 30 years ago, so many of the kids with Mexican parents were bilingual. 30 years later, it's gone. And I keep telling my Mexican friends, I said, my gosh, none of the millennials. So it's like I see all the Mexicans losing Spanish by the second generation. Do you see more and more children losing their mother tongue and drifting towards a common language like English?
No. Well, English is the only language that was got a chance to make it because English is simple. It's very easy to learn. The grammar of English is really basic. So the pronunciation is not as you can hear from me talking, but the grammar is rather simple. So it's the only language who has a chance to make it. But I don't think it will happen because Europe, as it looks like the last few years, is going in the opposite direction. The risk is dissolution of the European Union more than further union. At the moment, it looks like that, at least. There are a lot of forces trying to break it up.
And with Brexit, again, you're never supposed to talk about religion, sex, politics, or violence, but Brexit was a huge event. I mean,
yes,
if some smaller like Greece was threatening to leave, if Greece left, I don't even know if much of Europe would have even cared. But the UK was one of the major horsemen.
And Brexit is really interesting to see what will happen because everybody says that UK will go through really hard times due to this. But let's say that this doesn't happen, and for example, they goes the other way. And all of a sudden, in 5 years or 6 years, it goes very well for UK. Then we have a problem.
Who is the next closest country thinking about leaving the EU?
Well, there are a lot of countries which nationalistic parties, they have the majority. Actually, Austria has got the majority nationalistic party. There are some of the former Soviet, former East Europe countries, like Hungary has got a nationalistic government, and Poland, I think. Some of these countries, they have a very much pressure for more control of the borders, which is also a human thing. I can understand to a certain extent.
So back to I keep thinking of get the concept. What is your goal now? Do you try to get people to start with the online courses for didactic?
Well, our online course, let me tell one thing. Nobody makes a cent out of this online course. The fee is paid only because GC is helping us to do this, and that the administrative costs are going to be covered by the fees. None of the speakers, including myself, starting with myself, get any money out of this. And I took this decision because I think it's very difficult to make money with the online courses, because if you want to do that, you have to try to limit the recording of the courses, and then you have to start to do things like live streaming and so on, which still will not be able to prevent people from recording your course. And to me, it's more important the diffusion. So we're trying to do this just to spread a message, and we have at the same time, we have a Facebook page, and we want to make a community. We want to create and to enlarge our existing community as much as possible, to have a community of orthodontists whose purpose is learning about how to become a better orthodontist and offer better quality with everything that we said so far, meaning in real life context, without looking only at impossible cases, having really an average high level of work. That is what is important, average high quality, and looking also at the organizatory program, operation procedures, and marketing and everything else. It's not only focusing on how to correct a class 2.
And does GC orthodontics, are they what % of their sales in GC Orthodontics Europe is to orthodontists versus general dentists? Because like you say, when you go to a country that doesn't even have a specialty,
GC is the biggest private owned dental company in the world, I think. Is Japanese, and about the numbers, I think that, of course, GC, probably you know it as they produce mostly dental materials like composite and so on. And the Specialty Orthodontics, they started only 4 years ago. And I think in 4 years now, the sales is up to 5% of the total.
So GC sales is only 5% ortho?
Ortho is 5% of the total sales of GC, but started only 4 years ago, the orthodontic department. So I think actually it's been growing quite a lot. And I think it's 5%, but I mean, again, I'm not, as said before, we are not salespersons, and they give us all the freedom of this world, and they don't pretend anything from me. So I'm also about these numbers. I'm not totally sure. I think that is the percentage.
Yeah, and Japan is such a they're just such the opposite of being like a Instagram influencer. I mean, they're just so humble and quiet and shy. Yes. And when I was over there, I was only able to film 4 podcasts. Because you'd be warming up to this guy and you think it's going great. He's telling you all this information, and then the minute you said, "Well, let's turn on a camera," oh my God, they'd run for the door. Where in America it was like that for the older people. Like I remember some of these older people that had been on the show that passed away, like Bob Ibsen. It was like one of the last things he did was come on my show. And the whole 30 years I had before that of Dental Town, he never wanted his name mentioned. He never wanted his picture. It was just so against his entire grain. And now you have people, and you say, "Well, why you want to be an Instagram influencer? Well, what's your specialty?" They say, "Well, I just want to be rich and famous. I don't even have knowledge to influence you with. I just want to be rich and famous and an influencer." So it's very, very different.
But the Japanese, they are a very nice ethic of work. Their mantra is constant improvement. And another thing is also nice to work with a family company, because it's a very different way of thinking than a public-owned company. Public-owned company typically will deal with the middle management that, of course, they have to respond with their quarter results. And therefore, it's very difficult to make middle-term and long-term plans.
Right. And we're starting to see that in America, where a lot of private equity companies are saying, I don't want to deal with your with the markets anymore. I don't want to deal with the regulation. I wrote this. I wrote the other day to answer some guys' email. I put, learning to appreciate your accomplishments from hard work from any and all jobs done well. Whether you're sucking spit in Sacramento or pulling teeth in Philly, the satisfaction is the same. Whether you're playing checkers, chess, crowns, or composites, it's always the same game. But if a kid, it's like, what predicts the kid will do good in college? It's not his IQ and all this weird stuff. It's his study habits. If you learn the love of work, and your parents develop that in you, and you just learn to love work, life is so easy. But if all you're ever doing is trying to get out of work and retire, so it's very, very difficult. So,
it is. Definitely it is. Actually, that is the reason why I decided to be a speaker in the first instance. Is one way also to keep interest in what I do every day, because our job presents a risk of routine. There is no doubt. And to keep interest high, depending on your character, in my case, it works to be on a podium. So that's absolutely true what you say. And in this way, I don't think about retirement. So also, I don't have a family, so
you really respect your orthodontist professor mentor Birte Melsen.
Yes, very much.
She was. Don't tell her I said this on air, or she might shoot me. She was born in 1939, and this is 2020. Yes. How do you think orthodontics was different in her world versus now, and where do you think it will be when you're the same age as she is now?
Well, which is going to be relatively soon, because I'm 50. So that's.
And how old is she? What's that? How old is she? 1939.
81.
She's 81. Okay,
yes.
So you're 50. She's 81. That's a 30-year spread. So what do you? Does she? Well, let me ask it this way: does she think it's all going in the right direction, or does she think orthodontics is going off a cliff?
No.
And
she's. Well, this I don't want to answer for her. What I can tell you is this: that one of the things for which I respect her, there are many, But one of the things is also because I saw during the years that she was right about many things that she told me 20 years ago. So she saw many things coming. And what about the future of orthodontics? I think that a very good sentence was said by Arthur Clarke, and then Bill Gates made it famous, is that people tend to overestimate middle-term change and underestimate long-term change.
Give an example. Give an example.
I'll give an example. I don't think that orthodontics will disappear in the next 15 years, but there are chances that will disappear from here in 40 years from now.
Yes.
So middle-term changes. Now everybody's afraid to say Smile Direct Club and whoever else, they're going to kill us in the next 10 years. It's not going to happen, for sure. But if you ask me about orthodontics in 40 years, there is a chance that will not exist anymore.
And you think there's a chance it might not exist in 40 years because of teledentistry and AI?
No, but because of AI, automation.
AI and automation.
Technological progress.
So let's switch gears completely. What % of your practice is clear aligners versus fixed wires?
Oh, that's a very good question. I would say it depends on, well, it's a bit complicated to answer to this because here in Switzerland, for example, all kids, they are treated with insurance companies. They all have a private insurance. So it's a bit slightly different from United States. But I would say, let's take the adult market. Adult market is probably 60 aligner, 40 braces.
For adults.
For kids is like 70 braces, 30 aligners. And adults, one thing that is rather peculiar is this.
Adult was what? What did you say the adult was? Adult was
60-40.
60-40. And then child was 70-30.
Inverted, 70-30 with a reverted proportion. Because, I offer aligners or fixed appliance for the same price. And I'm really honest in telling the pros and the cons of both systems. But you would be surprised that if you are really straight with them, and I'm really not trying to sell braces in any way respect to fixed apply to aligners. But if you're really honest with them, and the last thing that I tell them is this, is say, look, I cannot know you in a first visitation of 15, 20, 30 minutes. I don't know which kind of person you are. So ultimately, you know yourself. If you think that you can comply in wearing the aligners, that can be a good solution for you. But if you can think that you cannot, so just leave it from the start. And you will be surprised, but a lot of adults, they say, I will prefer to have braces because they know themselves and they know that they wouldn't be compliant with the treatment.
So your adults are 60% clear aligner, 40% fixed. Do you see, is that mostly asking for their preference, or is fixed more for the difficult cases too? I mean, there's a lot of people selling clear aligners that say, well, you can treat anything with clear that you can treat with fixed. Whether you go clear or fixed has nothing to do with the diagnosis and treatment plan. Do you agree with that?
There's a lot. No, because it is like this, that it's not really that fix is for the more difficult cases and aligners are for the easier cases. Not like that. For example, if you have a class 3 open bite, it may be easier to treat it with aligners respect to fixed appliance. But there are also some conditions that are very difficult to treat with aligners. For example, deep bites, generally speaking, especially if there is no crowding, it's very difficult to treat with aligners. But the real difference is made by the compliance of the patient. Patients are, I find that, especially adults, they're rather honest in self-assessment. And there are patients that simply tell you, I know myself, I'm not going to be able to wear the aligners consistently. I'm going to forget it, I'm going to think about something else. And of course, also some compliance is needed with fixed appliance. You have to take care of what you eat or oral hygiene procedures and so on. But still, it's less than having to wear an appliance constantly. And some people simply know that they cannot do that.
So what about the children? Which children are thinking they can or cannot wear fixed? Did you see any variable there?
No, the problem with kids is that my problem with aligner with kids is that Again, they have to wear it, and you have to be sure that they will, for sure, drink only water when they have appliances. And to be sure of that with like 9, 10-year-old kid, for me, it's a bit difficult. Because you know that if they drink a Coke with the aligners, that's very detrimental for the teeth, because then basically they will sit in a bath of Coke without the brushing effect of the cheeks. And it has been proved that there are also some articles that describe that actually the aligners, if you don't comply with the instructions, they can actually give problems as much or even more than brackets.
So is demineralization still a big problem, or do you see demineralization drifting down?
No, well, for sure, if you comply with the aligners, if you comply with the instructions, meaning that you have to drink only water with the aligners on, the aligners are very good for that aspect. But at the same time, they take away the brushing effect of the cheeks, which means that the studies that they have looked at this, they have concluded there is not a significant advantage of the aligners with respect to the braces with what concern the mineralization, because you can have the damage also with aligners if you don't comply with the instructions.
That is amazing, and I can't believe my gosh, it's 3:40 p.m. here. I'm afraid to ask, what time is it in Switzerland?
Oh, it's 1:45, but again, I'm Italian, so for me it's like 5 p.m.
Yeah, that's the way it is in the United States in like New York City. But you know, like where I grew up in Kansas, they roll up the sidewalks at dark. And New York City, it's like I couldn't believe it. So many dentists, there are hours they didn't even open until like 9 in the morning, and they said because no one's even awake. Do you mind if I keep you up a little bit since you are an Italian?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Is lingual braces trying to make a comeback? I've seen more people. It's like it's back again. It's like I thought you ran away 30 years ago. Is lingual back?
Lingual has been having a very high moment, at least here in Europe, around 10 years ago. In the last few years, I've been suffering very much for the competition of aligners, because for the dentist, it's so much easier to use than lingual orthodontics. Lately, I think it's coming back again a little bit, because if you are honest with your patient, you cannot tell them that aligners are invisible. I mean, it's called Invisalign, but it shouldn't be called Invisalign. It should be called less visible align, because that's what it is.
I have not heard that. I'm going to steal that starting today, but I'll give you credit. So Invisalign should be called less visible. Less visible
align, because, I mean, that's what it is. You can see that something. So if there are people that are really, really, really demanding about cosmetic, then the only solution still is lingual orthodontics.
So how would you describe what the brand is for Invisalign? Do they look at that as like a great American company? Do they look at it? How do they look at it?
They look at it as a big company, of course, as a great company, and a company that's got a significant advantage over the competitors. I mean, they've been treating 6 million cases, and they have learned in the process. So undoubtedly, so far, they've been having an advantage. Of course, competitors are popping up more and more, and they will come more and more, and there will come, like always in life, someone that will do the same thing better. But so far, they've been doing pretty great.
But
and now they're even trying to answer a little bit to Smile Direct Club. Of course, I don't forget that they used to own 19% of Smile Direct Club before there was a litigation. But now they're trying to fight it back with the Invisalign Swift, for example.
So, history usually repeats itself for the same fundamental reason. So when Brandmark came over from Sweden, he only would teach oral surgeons. And then it took a long time before the periodontists could join the party. But general dentists, it took a decade. I remember getting kicked out of Gary Carr's endodontic course when he found out I wasn't the sacred endodontist. So that it's the path this is going. Do you think would be a wiser strategy to not try to segment the market and realize that they're all doctors of dentistry?
What do you mean? From whom? From
for any orthodontic company, or like Invisalign. I get it, because the 80-20 rule. I mean, when I talk to these orthodontic companies, they say, look, man, our orthodontists are the ones that are doing all the ortho. And the general dentist, they're like doing maybe a case or two a month, and it's not even worth their time. And then they add, and there are some hardcore redneck orthodontists where if they find out the rep sold anything to a general dentist, done. Can't come back to his office. So, but do you think those tribal things are going to fade away?
My ultimate feeling is that it doesn't really matter what I think is right or wrong, or what I wish. In Italy, we have a way of saying that, I don't know if you have the same in English. I try to translate it in English. We say, when you try to stop the wind with your hands, or even stop the sea with your hands. And this is what you're trying to do. I mean, nowadays, in an era in which everything happens over the net, you and me, we are talking from 2 different continents, and tomorrow 1,000 people will see this, and so on and so on and so on. Do you really think that it's significant that you isolate a rep because he's selling to a dentist? Is it going to change the dynamics worldwide or in your country? Most of the things that happen are so much over our payroll, over our pay level. If Smile Direct Club is going to survive or not, or if dental chains are going to survive or not, it doesn't depend on what we do. It depends on how long interest rates are going to be negative.
Another question I want to ask. A lot of orthodontists claim to me that 80% of most of their profits comes from the routine Class 1, the normal cases, but that they actually lose money on Class 3s, and if it's a high angle open bite, crowding, TMJ, perio. And I always say to them that historically Sears made a bad example. They were making all their profit dollars came from their catalog, where they're making sales for the same price, but they didn't have land, building, stores, cost, whatever. And Amazon started in '94. And when Sears finally lost their catalog business to the rural market, they realized that their city stores, their lingerie department wasn't profitable, their washing machines, or they didn't have a profitable department. And I've always said, if someone comes in and you are going to be a very difficult case, and this is going to be a very easy case, that you have to charge until you're in the profit zone, or do you not believe that and just think you average it out in an overall price? I mean, it costs more for me to fly to Zurich than it does for me to fly to LA.
Yes, but I don't believe simply in averaging price, meaning that if you are having a same price for everybody, it means basically you are overcharging the easy cases. Nothing else than that.
So do you have a pretty steep price elastic change? I mean, do you have a Chrysler, Chevy, Ford, Ferrari?
Yes. And then you have also to decide where you want to place yourself. Competitive, meaning do you want to offer cheap treatment, but then you will have to treat also easy cases. But then you are into competing on price with the heavy players, because right now they have access to easy money, and you and me, we don't. And otherwise, you decide to have a more high level end of treatment with difficult cases, and that one you will have to charge accordingly. It depends on many things. It depends where you are located, what is the density of the population around you, what is your reputation, and blah, 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 blah. Many different things, how you want to position yourself in the market. But to me, to try to make an average price and treat everything from impacted canines with the need for surgical intervention, orthodontic surgery, to class 1 crowding for the same price, it's not a model that I think is not even ethical at the very end of the day, because it means you're overbilling, you're overcharging the easy cases. And that's not really fair.
I want to switch gears. Sorry, I'm not going to let you go to bed.
No, it's not very fine.
You told me you told me in an email. You said The reason you wanted me to lecture over there, you said, is because what happens in the U.S. normally gets on the other side of the ocean with some years of delay. A big trend happening now, the biggest orthodontic trend, besides the Smiles Direct Club and Invisalign and all, and then the actual doing the ortho, is the delivery, where moms want one-stop shop. And the first two specialists that are getting married in dentistry today is pediatric dentist and orthodontist. It is the massive trend, and I think it is the most indefensible trend. I mean, when you're a mom, and in America, 60% of the moms have a job and work. Only 40% can stay home or whatever. And I got to leave work. I got to get my kid out of school. And then I got to go to a pediatric dentist. He says, well, I don't know if your kid needs ortho. You need to go stand in another line, So that one-stop shop.
Yes.
Do you see that trend happening in your backyard?
I don't see it happening, but it should. Let's put it like this. I think you told me that a lot of viewers or listeners of this are young dentists or young orthodontists that are starting profession. If anybody is an orthodontist out there and is starting now, given that there are differences from country to country and blah, 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 but the advice that I would, if I was myself, if I was 28 today, I wish, and I had to invest $1 million, I would rather invest and have co-ownership in 2 or 3 one-stop shop, as you said, with definitely pediatric dentistry involved, rather than invest in a single orthodontic office. The problem with the pediatric dentist orthodontic clinic is that alone one is difficult, that is going to be able to fill your schedule the full week. You will need probably to be at least in 2 or 3, depending on the country. And then you need to be co-owner. You don't want to be only there as an employee or as on percentage, because there is always the risk that the owner can find a new lover or a new wife or husband, or can have a daughter or a son that decide to do orthodontics, and you're out. So you need to have equity. But if you have got a participation in equity, I think it's the best thing, absolutely the best thing. I totally agree with you.
Well, I'll tell you what, if I was an older dentist and I was thinking about phasing out and I wanted to sell half my practice to a younger dentist, you know what I'd do? I'd say, we'll be 50-50 partners. And since I'm the old guy, I'll do all the hard work. I'll do all the braces. I'll do all of it. And all you'll have to do is the retention.
Yes. That's not bad.
And that's what everybody's thinking about. Is there any other I'm trying to think of there. I got a is there any other questions that I should have asked?
No, actually. I mean, you did an amazing job.
I did an amazing job. Well, my gosh, it must have been the Italian wine. So do you miss Rome? What's the difference between moving from Rome to Zurich? I mean, that's 2 very different cities.
Well, I've been living before in Denmark, Norway, and Germany. So I can tell you that I'm dropping back that south slowly. And life in Zurich is not so different from Italy. There are a huge Italian community, and the vibe is more or less the same. In North Europe, it was very different. And what I did is not so typical for a dentist, to change different countries with different languages. I would not recommend it to any of the young dentists from an organizatory and career point of view, but definitely I would recommend it for the fun of it. I loved every minute of it.
My gosh. And what would you say to a young kid who's listening to you right now in dental school and is thinking they want to be an orthodontist when they grow up? They want to be just like you, but you're 50 and she's 25. Would you still recommend it?
Well, yes, it's a beautiful profession because we deal with the well-being of people. So we give smiles to people. So it's still a beautiful profession. You may have to rethink the setup. What I just said before, probably I wouldn't open an orthodontic office alone. For future, I would think you would be better off with being in equity in 2 or 3 one-stop shop with pediatric dentistry involved. given those conditions, yes, absolutely.
So the bad news is the lecture is probably going to be canceled, but the good news is you think it'll be rescheduled.
No, it's going to be postponed.
Nice.
I'm totally sure about it. Cancel is not an option.
And
we are just discussing these days if we are going to reschedule, but it's going to be just a rescheduling, not a canceling.
All right. Well, I can't wait to see you in Rome. And on that note,
yes, and I hope you will come like one day or two before, so that I can take you around, because I studied in Rome. I grew up there, so you can have a private tour.
Oh, consider it done. I can't wait.
Super.
All right. Well, have a great evening, and thank you so much today and coming on the show. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was an honor.